Festive season. We're all ready for a break this year, but what happens when tenants take a break from paying their rent? Hi, I'm Simon Dippenau and I'm a property lawyer. Even these COVID-19 times, overspending and overconsumption are inevitable this time of year. Finances don't always stretch to the seasonal indulgences, and this year will be harder than most. If the tenants fail to pay rent, you have a right to take action, all within the law. To protect your asset, you may have to kick off the eviction process. It's called a process for a reason. There are multiple steps involved and you must follow them in order. If you don't, you could find yourself in trouble with the law. Rental housing legislation includes several acts and all are designed to protect tenants. Eviction must be conducted via the courts and require an eviction attorney. A landlord cannot evict a tenant without going through due process of law. A breach of the lease conditions is sufficient cause to cancel the lease. The most common cause of lease cancellation is rent arrears. If you're faced with non-payment of rent purely because your tenant has overspent at Christmas, you're probably not inclined to be patient, whereas you might have been understanding early in the year when so many incomes were hit by the lockdown. But whatever the reason for rent arrears, be aware that the law is particularly sympathetic to vulnerable people, such as children, the elderly, disabled people, or woman-headed households. You must give the tenant notice of the breach and a chance to rectify it within a set amount of time. This is done by giving warning in writing. If the tenant pays up, the matter is finished. However, if the breach is not remedied, the next step is to serve a letter of cancellation on the tenant. With luck, the tenant vacates the property at the end of the notice period. However, should the tenant disregard the lease cancellation, you may decide to start the eviction process. At this stage, an eviction lawyer is required. You must apply to the court to have an eviction notice served by the sheriff on the tenant. A court date is set and a deadline given for the tenant to oppose the eviction. In court, the order will either be granted or the case will be postponed for further fact-finding. In the case of vulnerable individuals, the court may wish to be satisfied that the unlawful occupier can find alternative accommodation and that they have behaved fairly and reasonably throughout. If the court is satisfied that the case for eviction is sound, the tenant will be given time to vacate. You may not change the locks, physically remove personal property, or behave in a threatening way toward the tenant. If you want to evict a tenant, you need legal representation by an experienced attorney to ensure you comply with all rental housing legislation. My firm, SD Law, are specialists in rental housing law. We will safeguard your rights while ensuring your tenants are treated fairly and with dignity. Give us a call on the number in the signature below to discuss your situation.